Hello and welcome to Horizon, where we look at how the stories today will affect your tomorrow. Why host Trump? That's what some Mexicans across the country are asking after Trump arrived in surprise fashion under very weird circumstances. Pretty much, well, screw it, I'm just going to go to Mexico and see what's up. Not really something that normally happens, but hey, it's Trump. Nothing he's really done so far has been normal. So why not just show up at another country's doorstep and get a visit? And that's what he got. And what's really surprising about this is with the same president who essentially compared him to Hitler just a few months ago. And I think this really goes to show that kind of both sides recognize there needs to be some reconciliation. On Trump's side, he knows he needs Mexico. It pays an important part of the U.S. economy. There's still a lot of stuff that gets manufactured there, even as he talks about trying to bring stuff back. Realistically, he knows he can only do so much, particularly to start with. And on the reverse, President Peña Nieto recognized the importance that the U.S. plays in Mexico, that it really is 80% of their economy is probably driven through, in some way, U.S. growth and U.S. GDP. So having a good relationship is going to be essential for both sides. And I think he's really smart in doing this, particularly recognizing that, there is this potential that Trump could win, which seemed impossible a few months ago. That he seems to really getting into his own groove that instead of having this desperation of, oh, you won, let's be friends, of more, let's start this relationship, we may disagree on some things, we may not be on the same page, but, let's just keep the border open, keep the door open, so to speak, and, see what happens. And I think this is really interesting, too, because he's also running for re-election really soon. And so he wants to appear that, look, I can put aside personal conflicts. I can, just because I disagree with him personally doesn't mean I can't put the needs of my country first, that recognizes we need to have a strong relationship with the U.S. for Mexico to be successful. So being able to pull this off required a lot of coordination. I think it's really interesting to see that it kind of seemed to go off without a hitch, other than, Trump kind of sticking his foot in the mouth at the end with saying, oh, by the way, we're still going to build the wall, and Peña Nieto saying, no, that's not what we're talking about. But, I think it's something that's going to be interesting to see. And I think it's also kind of reflects this kind of growing disparity of what he says versus what he does in Trump's case, that there seems to be a lot more blurring of that line. And it'll be interesting to see, does that line get more solidified, or does it stay this blurred, and hoping that lack of clarity actually works in Trump's favor, which it very well could. Now, outside of his Mexican vacation, Trump is also really just overall invested in the Latino and African American vote. I think he sort of recognizes that Hillary is really not that strong of a candidate to these communities. She's not a Barack Obama, where it really is this combination of, look at, he's one of us. He's kind of risen up. Let's support him. Let's elect the first African American president. She's just sort of another white woman who's happened to come along and happened to rise up the ranks. And oh yeah, by the way, she's the ex-wife, or the ex-wife. Some people would say that. The wife of former President Bill Clinton. And that obviously works in her favor, gets her to somewhat to this level. But I think makes it very difficult for people to say, yeah, she understands their needs. She's really going to look out for us. And I think this created an opportunity for Trump that he's really trying to exploit. Now, the first group is Latinos. And I think this is really the hardest, because even though what he said has been misconstrued, I think it's been very obvious that he doesn't really like most immigrants from particularly Latin American countries. I mean, granted, he originally said that Mexico, exports their drug addicts, their rapists, their criminals. He didn't say that all immigrants like that, just that that's happened to be a lot of what had been exported. So that's a little bit of a dicey situation to get onto. But I think you're also seeing in the campaign internally this battle between Kellyanne Conway, who really wants to try to get, in particular, the middle-class white vote, particularly from white women, and Stephen Bannon, the I guess kind of still quasi-CEO of Breitbart, who wants Trump to just be this slugger who's going out and being a back out rally and say, we're just going to fight everyone. This is how we got here. This is what we're going to keep doing, kind of under the same vein of Coy Landowski. If it's not broke, don't fix it. Even though I think for most people it's broke, but in their minds, maybe not. So I think what you really saw this is with this build the wall. I think Kellyanne Conway, who really would have said, let's just set this aside. Maybe people are going to start forgetting about it. Said for a while, I think that this is a very dumb idea. It's just not feasible. I mean, realistically, you're not going to build this wall. So the quicker you can kind of get away with that, or just sort of say, maybe we'll reconsider, the better. But I think Mr. Bannon really run the argument this week, trying to pound Trump into saying, okay, you're going to say this. And he's like, yeah, of course I'm going to say it. And then just kind of creates this kind of sour note, which was overall a great good trip for Trump to Mexico. Now, what that will kind of be going forward, I think is up in the air. I think that if Kellyanne's message really resonates, which I think it has, I think Trump is definitely more likely to listen to her over Mr. Bannon. But again, too, he may want to swing back to that back alley brawler attitude if it seems to be working or if he sees some sort of downside. Now, the African American community, he headed to Detroit this week to try to do some outreach, try to speak to a church, and it's obviously a very good step. To some extent, you could say it's a little bit late. Hillary Clinton's obviously, particularly in the South, gone to a lot of African American churches, really deeply involved in that community. But she also has that kind of hanging issue where her husband is associated with putting a lot of African Americans in prison, really raising that incarceration for African Americans, and really just kind of creating this cyclical cycle where people can't get out of. And it really starts with their husband. And you kind of hear us say it's a mistake, but I think for a lot of people, it doesn't really sound that sincere. Well, it seemed like a good idea at the time. So how are we supposed to know these side effects as opposed to, we made a mistake, we shouldn't have done that, but now we need to fix it. And it just sort of feels like she sometimes says that, but sometimes it's very opportunistic of, well, I think this is what you want to hear, but I'm not sure if I believe it. So it'll be interesting to see of what that works. But I think the biggest issue that Trump has is he's kind of missing a strong voice in the African American community. You saw the pastor kind of came out last week, had Hillary showing up in blackface. Not the best thing. Would have been probably worse if it was a white person coming out with it. Absolutely. But still, it's one of those inexcusable things that you're already having this guy who supports Trump who is initially just going to be turned off by it, or it's going to turn off a lot of the community who say, oh, like, how could this black guy support Trump? Like, there must be something wrong with him. And I think just putting on this sort of, well, do you actually believe this because you don't understand the history of blackface? But again, too, we can make the argument, look, he grew up in South Carolina, he understands racism fully. So it's a very interesting situation. I just think that he really should find someone who's a better representation other than this person, other than Dr. Ben Carson, because I think it's really interesting listening to some podcasts talking about this is, before Ben Carson got into politics, particularly within the African American community, he was looked up as, wow, like, this dude's ridiculously smart, ridiculously successful, worked his way up from poverty in Detroit to a brain surgeon. But since his political views have come out, it sort of turns some people off. And so I think that he's not as strong of a standard bearer as he may have been before he'd run or if he decided not to run, particularly because it seemed like his campaign was always plagued with, well, so what are you actually trying to do? Or obviously you want people to feel good and be civil, but let's be honest, this is America, and we have never been about civil discourse in the past 50 years. So why start with him? So I think it's something to work on. I think another though potential opening for Trump could be going into these communities like Detroit, possibly downtown LA, and saying, look, you've had issues with crime, with inner city violence that have been largely run by liberal politicians, and I want to do something different. But you got to sort of have something different to sort of adjust to, and I think that that's what's missing. Is it's a lot of, well, I want to change, but change to what? I mean, are you going to make it worse, or are you going to make it better? Do you even understand how to make it better? And I think there's a lot of things with this policy. It still needs to be worked out, but I think he could potentially have an opening there because there is a lot of particularly apathy in the millennial African American community towards Hillary Clinton that if you can say, look, I made some mistakes, I spoke out of turn, I'm not actually a racist, that maybe there's an opening because I don't know what other choice he has to get that community's vote. And, he's not looking for a lot. I think he's looking at 5 to 6% now. Maybe he can raise that to double digits. Maybe not. We'll see. It just seems like he's certainly going to have an easier time than Mitt Romney had against Barack Obama. But again, we'll have to see as they get closer. And it'll also be interesting to see how the first debate turns out. Now with Hillary, again, it's very hard to really get updates from her because she doesn't really do anything. And again, I think this is a very good strategy. I think that the less she talks, the better. You see her talk and she has coughing fits, which whether it's her allergy to Trump, whether it's pollen, whether it's something where she's sick, who cares? She really, the more she talks, the less people like her. And I think that she's sort of recognized that. I think it's what she doesn't want to give a press conference. She doesn't want to sort of slip up. She had this issue with, oh, it was Mark C. I thought that was just a letter of the alphabet, which is kind of strange because considering they had classified training, you'd think it was classified confidential, but having never taken that training myself, I don't really know what they covered. There's some argument to be made that maybe she didn't take it. And again, too, is that really her fault? Is that the kind of State Department's fault. Who knows? Clearly, someone messed up there if they have this issue, or they're now finding out that some of the stuff's classified, and maybe it just mismarked, or maybe it was misappropriated. And it's just sort of an all-around bad situation. And again, too, I think with her and Trump is that both of them have huge moral flaws and character flaws that against a better candidate, both of them would just get trounced. But because they're so disliked and reviled, it's kind of created this very weird opportunity for both of them that we still don't know who could win. And you see Trump now this week getting into an issue with the Florida Attorney General, who was potentially going to indict him over Trump University. And then, oh, what do you know? Oh, let me make it rain in your campaign a little bit. And then for her to say, oh, but I didn't know we were investigating him. And it's sort of, really? Like you didn't know that you were investigating probably one of the richest people who comes to Florida? I find that personally very hard to believe that you have this big fish that's somehow kept from you. But, maybe that's just the way politics work, where it's like, you scratch my back, I scratch yours. But I think what's interesting to see is the comparison that Hillary Clinton's team has drawn between her actions and Trump's. That, all right, Trump definitely committed this. It's hard to say if it's breaking the law, but at least it looks bad. But at the end of the day, it's $25,000, and it was sort of on a questionable legal case. And he, as he said, he may still win. So let's assume that he did that. I think there's a lot more serious implications with Hillary's relations to nukes, with how they handled Haiti. That if some of those allegations were proven, I think there's a lot worse that could be kind of drawn from those allegations. So it'll be interesting to see if any of this sticks. It'll be interesting to see if Trump manages sweeping under the rug, which he seems pretty efficient at. But again, too, it's only time will tell, and I think it's a very ongoing issue that hopefully we'll get a little bit more clarity as we thankfully round this election down really soon. So closing down some politics, let's move on to something more fun. Let's talk about tech. Now, with tech this week, one of the biggest stories is definitely this Tesla SpaceX and Facebook rocket that exploded, had a malfunction, maybe just blown up by aliens, maybe it was blown up by big oil. It's definitely a very weird circumstance that I think it's very common to see rockets launching that explode on the launch pad. You see rockets as they're in the air exploding. They've had issues with landing, but it's very odd for they're just performing tests and trying to make sure stuff's ready, and then all of a sudden the rocket explodes. It's just a little bit weird. Now, I'm sure there'll be an investigation. I mean, obviously the conspiracy theorists will get to point out, look, a drone, unidentified flying object, and then other people saying, oh, it's a bird, it's something else. But it's just a little bit weird. I mean, I guess it could come down to, oh, there's nothing to happen, just a circumstance. But it'll really be interesting to see what the final report says about this attack or explosion or accident, whatever, just because of how it happened and the nature of, probably one of the two most controversial people in tech. You have Elon Musk, who essentially declared war on big oil. He kind of thinks that he is humanity's great hope for the future of electric power, and I'm going to drive and propose and be the greatest inventor ever, which he very well could be. And then you have Mark Zuckerberg, who is kind of increasingly concerned about his own privacy, but wanting everyone else to get rid of theirs and let me make lots of money by offering these very personalized services that exploit who you are as a person. And to some extent, you could say it was kind of very interesting or poignant that here he was as the white man going into Africa saying, look at me, I have all the solutions to your problems. We're going to give you this internet that we're not even sure you actually want, but we want it because we want you on our platform. And then it explodes, and it's just, oh, we are very disappointed. We, invested a lot of money in this, and hopefully you'll be right. And it's like, dude, did you actually ever think about that if these people want it? Because there's been a lot of issues. I mean, you saw that with India. Saying, we don't want our future ruled by Facebook. We don't trust this company. We don't want to have our internet controlled by one company. We'd rather have access to the full internet. And I think that's what really should be expected. This whole idea that we're going to give people sort of partial internet or internet controlled by one company is utterly ridiculous. I mean, if you're going to give someone access to the internet, they should have access to the full internet and be allowed to make their own choices about what they want to do. Now, it's a completely separate issue in authoritative countries, which we're not going to go into. That could almost be a whole other show. But in the basic level, if you live particularly in these African countries, Facebook should not be the one controlling your internet access. That is just ridiculous. That is stupid. And I think that there's so much gray area about what they would do with that data, particularly people who could easily be exploited. So I hope some of these countries can sort of say, we want internet on our terms, that we have control, and we want to give our people an open internet free of just Facebook saying, here's your prepackaged internet. So we'll see what happens. Definitely expect some more updates as those develop. And then turning to phones, we have kind of two big phone announcements this week. Is first the Galaxy 7 Note. And when this first phone first launched a few years ago, it was just, I don't know, I thought it was very weird. It's like one of those phones that couldn't decide if, are you a tablet? Are you a phone? Like you just have this massive thing that you see people carrying around. And I was in Hong Kong at the time, and people are always carrying on multiple bags, so it wasn't an issue. But to me, it seemed like a very localized product that I could see working in Asia, where everyone has a bag, has a book bag, or even kind of the guys have their Metro Merces. But being in the US and even in Europe, I really struggled to see how that would work. But somehow they've made it work. I think they've recognized that the design needed to come down, and I think it's a lot more manageable. But now they have this issue with battery fires, which is kind of, again, very poignant that here's Apple about to launch their new phone, and Samsung's phone seems to be a fire hazard. And it's almost the reverse of what happened before with security issues and Apple's manufacturing and Samsung saying, hey, look at Apple, they're so bad, like switch over. And now Apple can almost say, joke's on you guys, some switch to our phone. But I think one of the issues with that now is that what are you really switching to? What do you really get with this new iPhone 7? I think that it's almost finally caught up with Apple that your phones are just sort of the same thing. Personally, I wish they would move more to the Tesla model of having software upgrades or having some sort of income stream other than you just give me new hardware that's more or less the same thing, except, oh, look at it now. It's now minus a headphone port. I mean, to me, headphone ports is not a reason to buy another phone. That's just ridiculous, and I don't really see what I need anything faster on my phone. The only thing I really would like is more battery life. But of course, they're going to say, oh, look, like we've added more battery life, but we've also doubled the power consumption. So we're left with a situation of, awesome, my phone is dead in 6 hours. Thanks, Apple. Maybe they'll come out with something great, but I think that really the main issue with Tim Cook's leadership as Apple is that they've just kind of become consistent in the sense of, sure, they make money, sure, they kind of deliver products on time, but there's nothing that's like, wow, that's really cool, I can't believe they did that, or, oh man, I can't wait to get my hands on X. I mean, Apple TV, the new one, it's okay, it's a decent product. The Macs, like, they're decent. There's nothing that's exciting. I think that the thing about Mac that's so interesting is, like, if you're outside of the fields of design, programming, and to some extent just any really creative industry, a Mac's just really a big waste of money at the end of the day. Sure, like, you look cool, but for what you do, it's really not necessary outside of, I would say, those three fields. So how that's going to translate, and I think that's why you've also seen some people just switch away to whether just larger phones or tablets, is that there's not a real need for a Mac anymore for these people. A lot of the other computers have caught up, and the price tag for what you get is just not worth it. So I am kind of curious to see if they have some interesting twists, if there is going to be something different, but I guess I'll have to wait and see, and I'll have some more updates on that if I think there's anything worth discussing. But right now, I think it's just going to be cool, a new phone, who cares? And finally, moving to global news, we've got kind of two big stories this week. The first one is the G20. And the G20 is always one of these events that sort of ebbs and flows of importance that sometimes seems like there's a lot of interesting stuff that comes out. And then you have this one, which seems to be more of a event that kind of is more known for its controversy than positivities. I mean, you start off with, oh, look, every world leader is coming in. Oh, grand staircase. And then you see Obama arrive, and it's like, oh, sorry, we're not going to bring that. And then you see the Chinese reporter tussling with, or the Chinese official tussling with reporters on getting access to Obama, saying, well, this is our country versus, but this is an American plane. And I think to outside observers, there's just so much internal conflict that's going on right now in China that is not clear, and that to a Western audience or a Western viewer, if you haven't lived there, wouldn't make sense. But let me try to sort of explain what's happening. So what has happened for the past probably 5 or 6 years is Xi Jinping has sort of slowly but surely pushed out his rivals, whether it's drumming up on corruption, which everyone in the Communist Party is guilty of corruption, or whether it's sort of pushing officials he doesn't like to retirement or just to get out of his way. He's essentially consolidated power and almost created this similar structure to what Mao had, where he's kind of revered. You see his picture everywhere. Everyone talks so highly of him, of oh, this great leader, oh, this great vision. It's very much different than what you saw with Hu Jintao, who came before him, who is more or less, let's just have China rise, like let's all be in this together, let's work through our problems, let's just get China to a better place and then motivate people to go forward. Xi Jinping is like, I want conflict. Like I want China to be the best. And if he sees an opportunity to snub the US or stick a finger in the eye or to sort of prove to someone else that you are subservient to China, he's going to do that because that is his entire modus operandi, is communicating to the Chinese people that China is back, we can boss around people as we want to, and you can't do anything about it because this is our game, this is our country. And I think it's really interesting because I think it also reflects to almost Obama, where you look back 5 or 6 years ago, he was a rock star. He's getting his Nobel Peace Prize. People loved him. Everyone couldn't wait to see him. People were lining up. And now he just almost kind of came off of, you're kind of just defeated, or really, why did you even, I guess you couldn't say why did you bother because you're almost obligated to go to G20, but it just sort of felt very flat. Everyone knows that he's leaving. No one really kind of wants him around anymore. He's kind of worn out his welcome. You're seeing people's true colors of, well, you don't have any value to me, so why should I waste my diplomatic capital in saying you or being your friend without knowing who's going to come next? And I think, too, if he almost just seems out of his element. He's been so well liked for so long, but to have to deal with people who really don't like him beyond sort of your average Republican or even members of Congress who, they hurl insults, whether it's Republicans in office or Democrats, and I think he's used to that. But I think to really see this international dislike of him, particularly from leaders who he trusted, is kind of shocking to him. But what's also interesting too is that he's almost pushing people away. The only exception seems to be President Pena and President or Prime Minister Trudeau of Canada, that they still have this sort of liberal background, liberal ideas. They all kind of seem hunky dory. They're best buds. But then you see Theresa May, the newly elected, or I guess now appointed Prime Minister of the UK, and she sort of came off as, well, we don't agree with you voting for the Brexit, so we're not going to talk to you, and we want you to know that we just disapprove of that. And it's very interesting to see the contrasting styles between Obama and Piñanetta, that Obama really could have said, look, I don't agree with the Brexit. I don't think that was the smartest choice. Or even, too, if maybe you say that at the time, but it's like, look, the British people decided that's what they want. We're going to fully support them. We're a long-time trading partner, a long-time security apparatus, and I think it's, all right, moving on. Whatever the people want, we let them do it. But to sort of interject and say, well, I think that was a bad idea, or why did you do that, is even if there is sort of a unknown factor to whether Brexit is a good or bad decision, it's not really his place to come in there and make a judgment. He should have said, look, it's their decision. We'll move on. Like, we'll just keep the relationship moving forward. And he sort of said that a few weeks after it happened, but now again is back into, well, we don't really agree with this. And so I just really don't know what he hopes to accomplish. I mean, you saw him meeting with the, I guess, South Korean Prime Minister, Ms. Park, about North Korea again. What's going to really happen in that? Nothing. Kim Jong-un could not care less about him. He's going to keep launching his missile and say, look at me, do what you want. And then now Obama's going to go to Laos. And again, too, it's, if he wanted to make a difference in Laos or do something, you should have gone there sooner, not in the last 2 months of your presidency where you're just going to apologize and it's just going to be, great, Obama's here. What's really going to make a difference, as opposed to kind of a major humanitarian effort of like, look, we made a mistake in Vietnam. We made mistakes in Laos. We realized a lot of these chemical weapons, and maybe we can help clean up. And let's repair the relationship, see if we can get something going. And it just kind of seems a more desperation of, oh, I'm taking my victory lap, and this seems like a good idea, and maybe I can get a positive news story out of this. And it's kind of sad just to see how much promise she started with, too. It's thanks Obama means being what a lot of people associate him with now. So I doubt a lot of good or anything else really going to come out of it. But I guess there's a few days left for his last international Asian trip. So maybe, again, tune in next week. We'll see if anything comes to that. And in the final story is Dilma Rousseff is impeached. I mean, I don't know what's going on in South America. It seems like she's gone. Maduro, the president of Venezuela, will probably soon be gone. So it seems everything's just up in the air. It's like, oh, we elected you, but we don't like you anymore. Or kind of got a little corrupt or he took his power, so we're just going to wrestle it back. Maybe there's going to be Latin America spring. I don't know, South America spring. Maybe we're just going to get rid of some people we don't like. I mean, you're also going to have potentially issues in Argentina with their huge debt issues. So who knows? I guess it's TBD and gives me more stuff to talk about and hopes it keeps you entertained. So until next time, have a great night and I will see you soon.